Welcome everybody to tonight's show. This is episode 12 of the Real, Raw and Relevant show with your host, Lockie. That's me, and it's a huge honor to have you joining us wherever you are from. If it's your first time joining us, welcome. And if you've been with us before, welcome back again, joining us on this little journey, talking about all sorts of things every couple of Wednesday nights. You might be wondering what we've got on the show for you tonight. Well, we're going to kick things off in a moment with some more mental health news. Mental health is a theme that we regularly have on the show, with some truly disturbing statistics. And I'm going to share briefly some thoughts around, you might have heard in the news, about a Rise Church and their reported intern burnout story. Next up, we're looking forward to sharing the first of our What Is It Like interview series. It's a series that we're starting. We're interviewing different people to discover what's it really like being them. They have profile, people notice them and see them, maybe, and have very strong opinions on them and what they do and what they stand for. And I thought it'd be really interesting to talk to some people like that. And tonight we're kicking things off by talking with Bob McCoskrie. I always say his name really bad. We pre-recorded this the other day, so don't freak out if you see me in a different hat and different jacket and bits and pieces. But we caught up with him and had a bit of a chat just before Easter, and looking forward to sharing that with you in a moment. And then we're going to wrap up the show with a little segment I've called What Is Truth. So that's a great lineup, I think, for tonight. So if you're liking what we do with the show, like we do at the beginning of every show, I just want to encourage you to like, share, comment, let people know that you like what's going on. Obviously, we want to get the word out that this is what we're doing. It's really cool. And if you're wondering how you can support the show, just tell people that you like the show is really the key thing. And if you want to support us financially, it's really simple. Just go to buymeacoffee.com/Lockie, and you can buy me a virtual coffee that I'll get to enjoy. So, hey, enough of all my preamble. Let's run our stinger and get on with the show. So we said we're going to keep talking about mental health, and obviously it's on my radar because it's been a bit of a passion for me. And so I keep an eye out for things that appear in the news that kind of give some context and maybe lead us in directions, because I want to deal with some facts around it. Because unfortunately, when you talk about mental health, people think, oh, it's just all in your head, or it's just about your feelings. But the reality is this is a fact for many people. And we shared on the show, I think it was it last time or the time before, we shared some information of people dealing with the COVID pandemic in America. I shared a bit of an interview that I heard on a podcast on the Leighton Smith show with someone who was very much involved from a government position, and they shared some concern about what might be happening for young people. And I was thinking, I'm not saying because I'm so smart, I was just thinking the same thing. You know, what's the impact of lockdowns, changes in society, the way that we talk about our future or lack of it? How's that affecting a younger generation, and specifically their mental health? And so I keep an eye out for articles that appear on the radar. And I just want to share one that came up the other day. Yep, that looks like it's popped up on the screen nicely. Yep, I'm still there. You can see me. Hey, everybody. Hey, hi there, Mark. Good to see you, buddy. So here we go. So this is an article that's titled Rise in Self-Harm Hospitalizations Points to Growing Mental Health Crisis Among Young People. I get so passionate about what I'm talking about sometimes I get a bit tongue-tied, so please forgive me for that. But this was an article that came up actually in February, and I just parked it in a list of readings that I wanted to do. And so I thought, let's just talk about it, because it actually gives some stats and some background to some of the concerns that myself and others have had. If you scroll through the article, I'm going to post a link to this later. You read things like this: mental health practitioners told the Weekend Herald that rates of psychological difficulties among children and teenagers were rising before the emergence of COVID-19 and have got significantly worse since the pandemic started. Okay, you scroll down a little bit further. Again, like I'll post a link to this later on. It says data collected by the Ministry of Health shows the number of self-harm hospitalisations for people aged 10 to 24 rose from 4,274 in the year to September 2016 to 5,652 in the year to September 2021, an increase of almost a third. So I said there's going to be some scary data, and again, I want facts and figures to go along with some theories that we might have. It goes on to say, here we go, the latest figures released in mid-December, so this is mid-December last year, indicate the number of self-harm hospitalisations 10 to 24-year-olds nationally rose an increase of 9% in a year. So it is increasing, and obviously people are concerned about it. They include, if I keep scrolling through there, and you have to get past the ads, they've got a bit of a graph here. Now you have to be a little bit careful with graphs these days because people don't portray them exactly how they should be portrayed. They take a sample and it slants how curves and patterns actually show. But the point of this graph is it's showing there was a rapid increase really from 2016 to 2018. It sort of looks like it's plateauing, and then we hit COVID and it starts to ramp up again, which is obviously disturbing. And so some of the analysis goes like this. In August 2020, the latest edition of the National Youth 2000 survey, which tracks the health and well-being of secondary school students, warned that the emotional and mental health of young New Zealanders had markedly worsened since the last survey was conducted in 2012. So we're talking a long period of time, like around 10 years between surveys, but the pattern is that there is a worsening position going on. In the latest survey conducted before the COVID pandemic, the proportion of students reporting symptoms of depression was 23%. That's nearly a quarter, up from 13% 7 years earlier. 6% of students surveyed said they had attempted suicide in the last year. For some people, an episode of mental illness may be triggered by direct experience of trauma or adverse life events. Social factors such as poverty, racism, and inequality have an impact, as do social media, alcohol and drugs, bullying, academic expectations, parental stress. And I thought this was interesting that this had now been included in the study. Big words to read out here. Existential concerns about climate change. I don't think teenagers use the word existential. That is very much an adult word. But see, I mentioned this the other day, that I wondered whether this was going to start filtering through into the thoughts and feelings of our young people, because now they're concerned about what's going to happen with their future. They said anxiety about illness and death, decreased social contact. What have we got here? Unsettling changes to daily life and schooling, family separations, and parents worrying about money and employment all weigh on young people's minds. They are not living in a vacuum. They are experiencing, they're seeing, they're noticing what's going on in their homes. And there's some stats here as well they've shared on self-harm hospitalizations by gender. Before we focus on the gender, which is fairly obvious based on the colouring, you'll notice that the pattern is there. Self-harm is unfortunately also on the rise. It's not slowing down, and it actually follows that graph that we had earlier where there was a big increase between 2016 sort of 2018. Sort of looks like it's slowing down, and then it's starting to ramp up again. And obviously you can see that females are way more disproportionately represented in this data than males. A couple of fun little points before we wrap this up. In November, a study in the American Medical Association Pediatrics Journal, oh my gosh, said that 1 in 4 young people, now catch this, 1 in 4 people globally are experiencing clinically elevated symptoms of depression, and 1 in 5 have elevated symptoms of anxiety, rates that are double pre-pandemic estimates. Studies in the UK and other countries have shown a similar pattern. So what was indicated some period of time ago, a concern that was raised last year in the States, is now coming out in the stats that we're starting to see. In December, the US Surgeon General General Vivek Murthy, one of Biden administration's top health officials, issued a public advisory saying the decline in children's mental well-being in America had become a crisis. Young people were facing unprecedented challenges which were having a devastating impact on their mental health. To help wrap this up, what do we do? I mean, this is the tricky thing is we can shy away from the stats because we don't want to know, because we might feel like, oh my gosh, what do I do with all this? But what are we doing? I was thinking about this today. I would recommend maybe that if you know some young people in your lives, keep an eye on them, especially the ones that you see around you on a regular basis. If you see their attitude towards life and what's going on changing in some degree, just first off, take note. Don't push dialogue with them, but offer dialogue if you're concerned. And let them, make sure that they know they can come and talk to you. Give them some opportunities to have some control over what's going on in their lives because they feel a little bit out of control. And something I was thinking about today, it's been on my heart for a little while, is encourage and share some hope. I think one of the things that's missing out of life for most people at the moment is there's a lack of hope. We look at the world and what's going on around us, and we think that actually hope's gone, that there is nothing left to look forward to. The economy's worsening. We've got inflation figures that are coming out, and the government's priming us with news media this week to say, by the end of this week, it's going to look pretty scary. They're saying that. You see politicians in America saying the world's about to end in X number of years. And so our young people are hearing all this. And they're looking at people's careers. People don't normally follow a career for the rest of their lives. This is all this uncertainty and all this upheaval, and they're seeing it in the news because that's what makes money, and they're seeing on social media this, that, and the next thing, and it's very confusing. So share some hope, even if it's a little bit, with them. I don't think personally the world is about to end in the next few years at all. I think the world is going to keep going. Share some hope and encourage them about their gifts and talents that they have. Give them some hope for their future. Encourage them and let them know that what they see on social media, and we say this all the time, don't we? But people need to hear it, that social media is not reality. It's a snapshot of the best generally of someone's life. In fact, I saw over the weekend, because it was Easter, people sharing family portraits. It seemed to be a thing. I first saw it coming out of America, and then I started seeing some profile people in New Zealand doing it, and it looks like their families are amazing. Everyone's dressed well, and they're in an amazing location. Everyone's got the right smile on. You know what? That is a brilliant moment for them to enjoy their lives, but that's not the reality for everybody all the time, and we have to encourage them that we are going to have good days and bad days. The world's going to look shaky at times, but if we have our hope and faith placed in the right places, then we can navigate anything that comes our way. Just some thoughts and a bit of a mental health update. I'm not mentioning this because it's just to get people's attention, but the sad story that hit the media late last week and into the weekend regarding Arise Church obviously got my attention, let's say that, because I'm very sensitive to issues around burnout because of my own personal journey. And if you're unaware of what's been going on, Arise Church is a very large and influential church. They've served our nation with conferences and all sorts of things that a lot of churches have really enjoyed being part of. And there seems to be particular accusations of abuse towards interns participating in the intern program that they run at the church. And right now, seems to be it's being investigated further. That's what we're seeing. Unfortunately, in the trial by media that's going on, I have no inside knowledge of any of this. I do not know any of the people who are part of it. And it's caused the resignation of a high-profile Christian leader, a Christian pastor in New Zealand by the name of John Cameron. Now, he's stepped down. And obviously there's a few things that I want to say real briefly, but I've got to recognise and I want to let you know that this is a very sensitive situation and it's ongoing. And so this is just my own personal opinions, just based on what I've seen so far. But here's my first point, and there's four of them quickly. I personally think right now we need to be careful and cautious around the reporting of this. I'm sure, like as it seems to be in most media things that come out these days, media doesn't tend to wait a week and get a full story. Something comes to their attention, they put it out there. And so we don't get balance, we don't get any of that sort of stuff. And so right now, while these allegations could or might be very much true, we don't really know everything that's going on here. So let's take a breath and care about the people that are involved. I saw in one of the reports they kept going on about ATMs in the church foyer. I could be wrong. Please tell me if you know that I'm wrong. But I've never seen an ATM machine in any church foyer. And I've been involved in church since 1991, and I ain't seen no ATM. And we know what we mean by an ATM. So automatic telling machine where you can get cash out as well as putting in. What we do see in church foyers a lot these days is FPOS machines where people are able to do their giving because people aren't carrying around cash or check, and we can't pay by check anymore, and some people want to support their local church. They use FPOS machines. Just the way of the world. That's the way it works. If you're part of a club and you want to contribute to it, then you're quite happy to use an FPOS machine. If you think of the church on some level, even though it's got some bigger meaning to it, obviously, as a club that a group of people, like-minded people with similar values want to be part of, they love to contribute. I know I have over the years, but I've never seen an ATM in the machine in a church foyer, and so it goes to make me a little bit nervous that maybe there's a little bit of bias, a little bit of a lack of objectivity in some of the reporting. Number two, while a person or persons are taking the fall for this right now, I suspect it kind of goes a little bit deeper to being more about systems and leadership in general. I've been part of large events and large churches over a number of years, and sometimes it takes a lot of work and a lot of people power to make a large thing happen. And churches like Arise are large. I've been part of many festivals. It takes a lot of people power to make that work. Now look, short bursts of putting a lot of effort into getting up early, staying up late, you can do short bursts. It's okay. That will not kill you, but sustained long periods are not good for me, you, anybody involved in all this. And we cannot function well under huge amounts of pressure over long periods of time and unreal expectations. So I think the challenge, I think, is a little bit broader because large churches, large organizations are trying to do some pretty large and expansive and big things. And I think coming from this, that maybe systems that require large people capital are going to get looked at a lot more closely over this coming period of time. Number three, I've never met John Cameron. I don't even know him. He doesn't know me, obviously. I have no clue, and we have no clue really about his involvement into what level this goes. So let's hope and pray for him, his family, hope and pray that it all gets handled really well. We want to see this sorted out. And finally, for all those affected, this is really, really sad for a number of reasons. If any of you know anyone involved, don't reach out to them to give them your opinion. Reach out to give them your support. Be there for them. As someone who's been navigating burnout myself, the last thing you want is everybody's opinion, but you want some love and some care. And people suffering from burnout don't need a week off to get themselves right, get their head right and carry on with their lives. They need rest, they need space, they need time, they need to be able to process, they need a listening ear, and that process is way slower than they want and that you want. And so let's just be gracious and loving to them. I actually, to be honest, I think people suffering burnout in church, it's kind of difficult and uncomfortable, and I have to say this, I guess, because we have to wrestle with our broader feelings of disappointment of how it's gone on, something you've given yourself to, you feel like maybe God's let you down or some way, or you've let God down. When you mix a bad moment with your faith, it does taint someone's faith, and so they will process that out loud many times on social media. Give them the space and the opportunity to be able to do that. It's not all about you, it's actually about them and their own relationship with God right now. So hopefully that's all okay with you. So now I want to share with you the first of these interviews that we've got. Like I said, this is with Bob McCoskrie. Again, can't say his name, but he's a really interesting chap to talk to because he works and operates in a world that some of us might be too afraid to even stick up our hand and join in that conversation. So goes for a little bit. Enjoy the conversation, and I'll back with you to wrap up the show soon. Joining me now on the Real, Raw and Relevant show, it's my pleasure to introduce someone you might have seen on your screens before, Bob McCoskrie. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Hey, good to be with you, and not too often on the screen.
Yeah, well, as you can tell, I find it hard to say your last name. How do you say it properly? Help me out here, bro.
Yeah, it's McCoskrie. McCoskrie.
Yeah, see, I still won't
And
get
I
that right.
was going to say that I've got the perfect face for radio. So, yeah.
But at least your hair looks good.
My wife cut it because we've been in lockdown for quite a while.
Well, she's done a good job. Pass on our compliments to her. Hey, here's
I
a bit of
will.
a bit of a bio for people who don't know you or don't know some of your background. I stole this online to read on. Here we go now. So you can tell us afterwards if they're right. I've got here that you are the director of Family First. Well, that makes sense. You're wearing the shirt. You've got a master's degree in commerce. You're a qualified teacher. And I think most of us have probably seen you in the last little while on TV and social media, sometimes duking it out verbally, not physically, with some pretty high profile people. Was that a fair summation of who you are?
Yeah, that's probably it. I think I actually, you just cut out a little bit, but I think I got it that I was a youth worker in South Auckland with Youth for Christ back in the heyday of the 90s, and then set up a trust in South Auckland. So I got sort of experience just working with young people and families at risk. And then I did the radio stint, obviously, with
Mm.
Rima. So that got me used to being on your side of the microphone that you're on right now. And now I'm on the other side. So I've sort of had that experience of the business world, the rubber meets the road, street level, working with families in South Auckland, and now the broadcasting. And so it was kind of like preparation ground for this role, which has been going for 16 years. I had no idea what to expect when it first started, but it keeps rolling along. And kind of my philosophy is, as long as the opportunity is there, as long as I don't blow it, and as long as we can sort of be a credible voice, then we'll keep going.
Cool. So that is, you mentioned about what was it, Youth for Christ or whatever it was?
Mm.
Yeah, that's where I first met you. I remember, and I probably talked to you about this before. I met you there. Of course, you won't remember me. I was at some briefing in Otara for some event that was about to happen. That was the first time I saw you, and probably the first time that I couldn't pronounce your last name. But anyway, well I'll get there by the time I'm 100. But anyway, so
Well,
we're doing this.
the funny story about that, Lockie, is
Yep.
that often you put out a media release and you actually put your name in the media release and you spell the name correctly, obviously, and then reporters go and uh, write up a news article and they've spelt my name wrong. And I'm thinking, it's a copy and paste. What's going on there? So, yeah, I always laugh. I think they do it deliberately just to wind me up. So I'm used to it.
Yeah, I'm used to it too, bro, because my name is actually not Lockie. It's a shortened version of my real name, and I don't know how many times people have called me Lockie McLaughlin, all sorts of things. You name it, I get it all over the place. Hey, it's just par for the course. Now, we're doing this little series of interviews, and they're called What Is It Like? And we've titled your one, What Is It Like Being Bob? And because I wanted to talk to you because, again, you're in this space of talking about some issues that for people of faith might not be contentious, but being in that public space. Famously, I saw you being interviewed at, I can't remember which TV channel it was, debating some issues with the Prime Minister, and some interesting eye rolling that was going on during that time. It was very entertaining TV. And then I wanted to talk to you and find out what it's like being you. Now, before we talk about the Bob we think we know now, I'm probably going to learn a bit more. Let's go back a step and let's talk about phrase, I'm a bit scared to say, little Bob, when you're younger. I don't know if you've always been called Bob or whether that's a shortened version of your name. Tell us a little bit about where you came from for just a few moments and where you grew up, that sort of thing.
Well, that's the unknown fact, is that actually, even though it's Bob, my actual name is Robert. And it's Robert Bruce. So for all the Scottish, Robert the Bruce.
Oh,
Um,
awesome.
Bruce was actually my mother's doctor at that time. So I was named after my mother's doctor who delivered me. So it's Robert Bruce. I was born and bred in Papatoetoe, which is in South Auckland. It's sort of squashed between Mandareira, Otara, and Mangere. And I've been a South Auckland boy all my life. Went to Papatoetoe Central, Papatoetoe Intermediate, Papatoetoe High School, and then off to Auckland University to study. I've got two brothers and who are both older than me, so I'm the kind of picked on, beaten up little kid. So that's how I've learned to defend myself. And one interesting story for you that most people won't know is that when I was young, at about 5 or 6, I would mumble a lot and pick up the phone, and rather than saying Bob McCoskrie speaking, as we were taught to say, I would go Bob McCoskrie was ringing. So my mother sent me off to elocution lessons with a dear friend of hers, Eileen Froud, and so I went and basically learned how to speak properly, speak the Queen's English, and once again, that was kind of a little bit of preparation ground just for, learning to speak publicly, learning to speak so people could understand your actual diction and your words. And so, those elocution lessons, effective speaking, I think it was called. I think I got up to about grade 5 or something. So that sort of placed me in great stead. And then I just had this great passion for radio. And my first kind of real radio DJ job was I was the Friday night DJ at Paradise Ice Skating Rink, which for any Aucklander will know Paradise Ice Skating Rink in Glen Innes.
Certainly.
Probably you do as well, Lockie. Everybody went there at some stage in their life, and I was the Friday night DJ. So, that's a bit of background that people may not know.
So was that playing hits of the 80s and 70s or something along those lines?
Yeah, it was. It was Popcorn for the Speed Skate, and then we had the Couple Skate, some romantic song, Careless Whisper by Wham or something, and then but I loved it. I actually did it at home when I was about 11 or 12. I'd sit in my bedroom and actually spin the same 45 record on a record player and read the same ad and do the same intro, practicing my timing and everything. So I'm disclosing way too much, eh?
Well, this is why I wanted to do this, because people see people online and see them in the public sphere, and you don't really know who they are, eh? And I think one of the barriers for people being dehumanized is we only see these little short moments of them, and it's easy just to throw some vitriol or bits and pieces out. Now, you mentioned, and you're wearing the shirt, Family First. How did you get involved with Family First? Is Family First something that you helped birth, or is it something that you got involved in? And when did that happen? I think you said something like 16 years ago or something, just before.
Yeah, so between 2002 and 2006, I was breakfast host on Radio Rema, which was nationwide, and we sort of took it up to a new level. I mean, probably deep down, my desire was to be a more values-based, Christian-based alternative to perhaps News Talk ZB, Paul Holmes at the time, and Radio New Zealand. So we were covering some of the same issues. So, but from a Christian worldview. So every week, Helen Clark, the Prime Minister, would come on, and I would do an interview with her. From what people tell me these days, it was one of the most listened to bits of radio of the week, because you had me, the conservative right winger, against the left wing Prime Minister, and it was pretty, head to head discussion. And we interviewed, as part of the breakfast, and also did talkback as well. So over those 4 years, I quickly came to realise that the conservative voice wasn't that bold in coming forward. It was hard to find people that would speak up. At the time, the Maxim Institute was one of the few organisations that sort of could really go to and trust to be a credible voice. There were some pro-life groups as well. There was a few others. There were some politicians as well, and we tried to tackle some of the tough issues. I remember the day after the prostitution law reform was passed, Tim Barnett was the Labour MP who had shepherded that through the House, and we spoke to him the following morning. Asked him what he thought, asked him about the challenges of it. So, we were willing to interview people from what you might say is the other side. I think I even interviewed Sue Bradford, Helen Clark, Don Brash was the leader of the opposition at the time. So over those 4 years, sort of realised that there was this gap just in terms of equipping and speaking up on some of these family issues, especially from a conservative viewpoint, and with the Judeo-Christian family values. And so in 2006, I formed Family First, and the name just came to me, and just felt that was the name we should give it. Set up the trust. And 16 years later, there's been some, real doozy battles that we've had in the public debate. There was the anti-smacking law. There was the same-sex marriage bill. There was the cannabis referendum, the euthanasia referendum. There was the abortion law. And of course, probably the thing that put us most on the map was that the government came after us and wanted to deregister us after
That's
the
right.
same-sex marriage law was passed. And we're currently waiting. We've been through 4 court cases, Supreme Court. We're waiting on 5 judges from the Supreme Court. It's been 9 months they've been considering our case. It's a really significant case because what the Crown has argued is that to argue for the traditional family and for traditional marriage is not in the public benefit. That's their words. And so the decision of whether a group can receive the benefits of being a charitable organisation, like every other charity that may be arguing from the other side, for example, the Drug Foundation, who are arguing to legalise cannabis, are a charity. And it's okay for them to be a charity. But Family First, who is arguing don't legalise cannabis, well, they want to deregister us. So the inconsistencies are there, but it's really they don't like our views on marriage and family. So it's a really significant case. And, there was a recent case in Finland where a politician actually quoted scripture in a tweet to her own church, and she's actually just been acquitted of those charges. And so that's a really important victory in terms of just freedom of speech, freedom of belief. So that's how Family First started, and it's been a bit of a roller coaster of a ride, to be honest.
Well, we've all got to watch it from our safety seat. I think that's part of the thing that's, I suppose I've been concerned for you, and I don't know, that's not even the right words. I just watch with you being in that space thinking, man, who is this guy? How does he do this? How does he function and look after himself through that? So I want to ask some questions about that in a moment. But before I go there, what is the thing about doing the Family First thing you're doing? What is it that you like the most? What's the most fun thing? What's the thing that, you're most passionate about in it?
That's a terrible question. It's a real challenge. I mean, probably the best thing I like is that I'm my own boss. So I can sort of just say, hey, I've had enough of this. I'm up to here in research. I'm up to here in being under flack. I'm just going to go and have a coffee somewhere. So that might be one advantage. The other thing that I really like is that what people don't see is that behind us is thousands and thousands of families who are praying and are contributing financially to make us happen. One of the arguments during the cannabis referendum was that we were being funded from American sources. We haven't received a cent from overseas, and we haven't received a cent from the government. And I would not take a cent from the government because that immediately compromises. And as we can see, the media are getting in trouble because what people perceive is that the government is funding media. And so that, that affects your independence and ability to speak up. So what I enjoy is coming to work knowing that we are being that there's a whole lot of people whose views are important, and they trust us to represent those views, and that's a huge privilege, but it's also a huge responsibility. So it's something we take really seriously.
See, and that's part of, I suppose, why I wanted to do this interview, to help people get to know you are a person behind a camera or on Facebook or YouTube, where people are seeing you, because you do stand in a very difficult place that I think most people aren't. There'll be a lot of people, I would guess, that share your views, but just very scared to put themselves out there saying them. They're maybe more comfortable in an environment, say, like with a like-minded group of people or in families. They'd say them quite openly. And it was some research I saw a little while ago where people were being interviewed for TV on a contentious issue, and they interviewed them off camera and on camera, and their off camera answer invariably was different to what they said on camera. So it's a really tricky world that you seem to be in. And in light of that, how do you deal with it? Like, how do you deal personally with all the hate and vitriol and the people who have diametrically opposed ideals and values to you, and they're quite happy to type it and say it? Like, how does Bob deal with that?
Well, I think, I guess I must just have a thick skin, and it does sort of, it's water off a duck's back, as the saying goes, I find, which is probably a good thing that I can be in that space. But sometimes, it does get you down. I think, like you asked me, what's the best thing about coming to work? One of the things I do struggle with is that a lot of people have judged me and judged Family First based on what the media has said about us.
Mm.
And so that's always very frustrating because that's generally misrepresented or it's taken out of context. And so that's always been the difficulty. But in terms of one of my favorite quotes is from a preacher that most people will have heard of, Billy Graham, Reverend Billy Graham. And he said, when a brave person takes a stand, it stiffens the spines of others. And I think that's true, that when we speak up on some of the common sense things that we need to, for example, only women can give birth, which is apparently a radical statement these days, and you know that marriage is a man and a woman. When you say these radical things, actually what you find is that you stiffen the spines of others who believe those. And I can guarantee that if they did that news interview test that you were talking about, which I find quite fascinating, I bet if they got a group of people who all thought the same and they had conservative views, they would be much more likely to speak up on them also, because you get that weight of numbers and you stiffen each other's spine. So that's kind of been my modus operandi. I want to stiffen the spines of people to speak up on some of these basic truths which seem to be getting lost in our culture. So yeah, that's probably where I'm coming from.
That's good, Bob. Now, I got to ask, because I'm probably just as curious as everybody else. Are you able to say, and you can say no, and I'll cut it from the interview or I have to, what's it like debating someone like the Prime Minister? Like when you're preparing for it, you know you're going to be like on one of those breakfast shows and you know there's might be that eye-rolling moment that we all giggle about, but we don't know what it's like being Bob sitting on the couch next to someone who just appears on face value to really dislike you and what you stand for. What is it like? How do you prepare for that? What does it feel like for you in that moment?
Well, I think I just go into those interviews and I do media training, and just give people advice of how to tackle those kind of tricky interviews, and it's generally how the other side do it as well. You basically go in with your 4 to 5 key points that you really want the audience to hear, and make sure that you're prepared. You have a full understanding of that. When I train people, I tend to pretend to be looking to catch them out. So I try and ask them really stupid, tricky questions so that at least they're prepared for that stupid, tricky question. One of the other things about my background is that when I was at high school, I was on the debating team, and so there's 3 people on the debating team, and the first speaker, which I happen to be, so basically you have the first, second, third speaker of both sides, and then the first speaker has to do a rebuttal. So I'm sitting there listening to 3 speakers from the opposition and figuring out a rebuttal. And I can't just get up and just rehash my own points. I have to destroy their argument. I have to listen carefully to what they're saying and destroy their argument. And so that was really good training because, the old saying, Lockie, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, which means we need to listen twice as much as we speak. And so that, it taught me to listen really closely to what they were saying and just look for simple points that didn't attack them personally, but simply attacked the basis of their argument. And that's one thing that, we've been really careful about with Family First, is that we haven't gone after people personally. We've had fun. We've always looked at the arguments that they have presented. But for example, during the anti-smacking debate, Sue Bradford received some death threats. We were one of the first organisations to put out a media release saying that's completely unacceptable, and they are not our supporters, because if they were, we don't want their support. So I think it's important that we see people just with a different view, respect that different view, and be willing to take it on. And I guess that's actually, I've been reading a recent report that's come out about trust in the media. And part of the reason that the trust is declining is that a lot of people are saying, look, we don't want the media to tell us how to think. We want them to tell us both sides of the debate. And, I think that's really important. So I guess back to your question, sitting with those people, look, they've got a bunch of ideas they believe are right. I've got a bunch of ideas that I believe are right. and then you put them to the test and you challenge each other. And I think that's really healthier. That's actually that's good when you get that chance. The problem is that in so many cases I have turned up to media interviews where it has been stacked. Both the interviewer and the guest that they've invited to represent the opposing view are both opposed versus me. I don't think I've ever been to a media interview where I haven't been in the minority, but that's just the way they do it. I mean, the cynical part of me says it's the only way they can win a debate is by stacking the debate. But it just seems like it always goes that way. So I do sort of get used to that.
You've done so well. If anything, I'm going to sound a little bit greasy, but I think there'll be a bunch of people like me who are proud of the fact that you're actually able to do what you're doing. And I found it interesting because I watched your clip you did, it was maybe a few weeks ago now, where you actually used that debating analogy. I was sitting there, I was thinking of actually doing a segment on our show about debating, and then you just did it, so I'll just share it onto our show, what you said. But I grew up exactly the same on debating teams and learning that thing that I think a lot of people have lost now, the whole critical thinking skills, how to think on your feet. You're focused on the issue, not the person. I think they're things that are really good for all of us, and I'm glad you've brought up. Now, to help wrap this all up, again, let's go even more personal. How do you look after yourself emotionally, spiritually in your role? And you can't answer it with KFC, okay? I know that you love your KFC. That cannot be the takeaway that we leave with everybody, that if you just eat KFC, you're going to be okay. I know where I live in Taupo, there's a lot of vitriol against our local KFC venue. But how do you look after yourself emotionally, spiritually, all those sorts of things?
Well, I will come down and do quality control of KFC in Taupo if you want me to. I'm happy to make that sacrifice.
I'll shout you some chicken, buddy.
Yeah. What I've realised, well, there's a couple of things. Firstly, for me personally, my faith is a rock. It's an anchor. So that's really important to me. The second thing is that when I was sort of involved in leadership training, even with Youth for Christ, what I learnt and what I've taught since and really encouraged other leaders with is that in your life, you tend to have people that there's three categories: people that drain you, that demand from you, and that's okay. We need to be available to minister to people and give to people. There's that middle ground people where we just enjoy hanging around them and have a good time. But then there's those people in your life who can speak into your life and give you permission to, and you give them permission to speak into your life. And they have a good influence on you and challenge you. And you've got to make sure that you have that top category, because often that's the one that we don't really focus on. So I've looked hard for people like that. And for example, what a lot of people won't know is that when I send out a media release, I actually send it to about 15 people that I trust, and I have said to them, I give you permission that if what I'm saying is stupid, dumb, mistaken, bad tone, you have permission to tell me off.
Right.
And so that's my accountability with people that I trust, and it needs to be people that will speak positively into your life and respect you as a person, and that I respect as well. So it's a two-way thing. So that's the second thing. And thirdly, in terms of the mental and the physical, I think I walk the dogs every morning. We're fortunate that we're back onto a rather large reserve. I tried to play soccer. Now I'm doing a bit more refereeing. I watch soccer, support Liverpool as every good Kiwi should. And so there's and obviously family time is really important. And look, I've written a whole research paper on the benefits of family dinner together. Family dinner is a really precious time for us, and we try to be all sitting around the table at least 4 or 5 nights. It's pretty hard with growing teenagers. So my kids are 24, 21, and 17. Surprisingly, they're all still living at home. So that's interesting. Yeah, perhaps I should have been a worse parent. So then my wife and I could just go to the movies without having to leave food for them. But that family dinner is really important. So I think the other thing, Lockie, which you might be just interested in, is that I don't take too many speaking engagements, especially over the weekend and not on a Sunday. And the reason is because I believe strongly that if I'm going to push a message that we should put family first, I need to do it myself,
That's
and
good. Yeah.
I need to be putting family first in my life. So hopefully we'll get to a point where my kids look back and say, well, Dad, you were preaching it, but you're also doing it. So I don't want to be at the other end where I've gone around telling everybody to put their family first and my kids don't know me or my wife doesn't want to live with me. So yeah, that's a challenge.
That's really great stuff. Now, quick fire questions. How many kilometers to the nearest KFC?
It's on the motorway, so it's the on ramp about 600 meters off the off ramp, and you're there.
And do they know you by name?
No, they don't, but I was the first person in their shop after the first major lockdown in 2021. In fact, I made a video of it biking, waiting outside the front door, which went viral. So,
Sorry, I know I'm banging on about the whole KFC thing, but I've just seen you mentioning it on social media too many times, and people might think that is the only thing you actually eat is deep fried chicken with a dirty bird there.
is there something wrong with that?
Oh, I don't know. Some people will be quite judgy on that too. They're always looking for some way to give you a kick, aren't they? So
Oh,
that's the
look,
way it
no,
goes.
look, they need to understand that I always get coleslaw and a Diet Coke, and the calories in the Diet Coke cancel out the chicken.
And is the roughage from the KFC? Oh, sorry, the coleslaw pushing it through. Anyway, that's enough of talking about that. I'll get myself in a pile of trouble there. Hey, thank you so much, Bob. Hopefully this has helped people discover a little bit more who you are outside of the issues, even though we've talked briefly about some of them. We really appreciate your time and sharing some of your life with everyone on the show today. So thank you so much.
Hey, privileged to be part of the program.
Well, hope you enjoyed that interview with Bob. It was great catching up with him. And the thing that I might have mentioned a few times on the show, we tend to have in all these interviews that I've ever done a conversation pre and post. And I love those times. If it wasn't, we talk about all sorts of things. It's not appropriate to me to share everything that happens. But the people that you get to talk to, when you get to know them, it just makes such a difference. And so maybe there's someone out there that you know that might not think they like Bob or something, they've got some issue. And if you think that was cool, share it with them and let them know, hey, he's a normal guy and unfortunately he likes Liverpool and he likes KFC. So there we go. Something that's been on my heart, I say that on a regular basis, and it's come from, I guess, we celebrated Easter, didn't we, over the weekend? It's that long weekend, has special meaning for me and for many of you who watch this show. We get to focus on the death and resurrection of Christ, and I hope in some way we get to share some of that meaning that we have from that graciously and cautiously with those around us. Now, during the lead up to Jesus' conviction for a crime he didn't commit, and when I wrote those words down, I'm thinking 80s show. Some of you might think of that, who's convicted for a crime that he didn't commit, but with all joking aside, he was convicted for a crime he didn't commit. He didn't do any of the things they accused him of. They accused him of all sorts of crazy stuff that just never happened. And he was bounced around the leading class of the time. There's a selection of priests, including the high priest, Roman soldiers, and a very powerful man by the name of Pontius Pilate. It's not a name that you hear on a regular basis, but he was a very specific character in that time. And history tells us that this man, Pontius Pilate, had the power to decide if this crucifixion thing that the Jewish leaders of the time were asking for was actually going to go ahead. Depending on which gospel you read, his wife was really disturbed by this. She had a dream and she felt really uncomfortable and asked him to have nothing to do with it. There's all this imagery of him washing his hands to wash his hands of any guilt of this. And one of the phrases he actually says in that moment is, "What is truth?" He says, "What is truth?" Three simple words that had a huge meaning for him and ramifications in that time. And I actually think they echo a little bit now. It's super important to the context then because he knew something wasn't right about the truth that was being portrayed or the accusations that were being made about Jesus. He just knew something wasn't right about it. And it's super important, I think, now as well, in my opinion, as the truth is not always obvious today. Where the truth is, it's generally being attacked. It's up for question. It's being watered down. And you could be, if you're a conspiracy theorist, you could be wondering whether there's some plan going on in the background around that. And Mr. Pilot had those words to say, but philosophers have been wrestling with the same thing for generations as well. Now, in the news, hopefully I can do this without it being sort of a wait for me to get it done with I'm fiddling around with technology. Today, you might have heard that Johnny Depp is in court. He's suing or something his ex-wife for defamation. And I don't know, this is going to work. I just took a little screenshot of it. I heard a little bit of the trial, and I quote Mr. Johnny Depp here. He says, "My goal is the truth." See, everybody wants to know the truth. Everyone wants to express the truth. Everyone wants to talk about their truth and those things that go along with it. And I actually hear it in our culture all the time, the truth. And it seems to be so subjective now. It can be interpreted based on your culture or your personal experience. And the phrase "your truth," as in your truth, it's used ad nauseum. And if it basically it means if you consider something to be true, then it must be. So if I say something's true for me, then it is the truth. But just by saying something is true somehow, and that it's right and it's above scrutiny, I don't know that that's right either. And any question, it seems, that leads to challenge that seems to lead to high levels of offence naturally coming. So what does truth? What's the definition of the words? Three quick things: quality or state of being true. So the definition of truth is that it needs to be true. Okay. The second one is that that which is true is in accordance with fact or reality. I see all the time people talk about the truth that's got no bearing in reality. And the final one of the definition is a fact or belief that is accepted as true. So just because someone comes up with an interesting idea doesn't necessarily make it the truth. In fact, I read an explanation on a website today. Just bear with me. I'm just going to read a few of them out, and I'll post a link to where I got this from a little bit later. And it simply says this: truth is not simply whatever works. This is the philosophy of pragmatism. In reality, lies can appear to work, but they're still lies and not the truth. Truth is not simply what is coherent or understandable. A group of people can get together and form a conspiracy based on a set of falsehoods where they all agree to tell the same false story, but it does not make their presentation true. Truth is not what makes people feel good. Unfortunately, bad news can be true. Truth is not what the majority say is true. Truth is not what is comprehensible. A lengthy, detailed presentation can still result in a false conclusion. Truth is not defined by what is intended. Good intentions can still be wrong. And finally, truth is not simply what is believed. A lie believed is still a lie. So where can I leave this with you here on this whole subject of what is truth? Can I encourage you to discover what is true purposefully? Like when you see something, I encourage you just gracefully and gently dig into it for yourself. Like, don't be the world's biggest cynic, but have a little bit of curiosity to look into something beyond just what's on face value. The discovery of truth is one of life's greatest gifts and achievement. Like I said, don't just be skeptical about the truth presented to you. And then the traditional media, social media, that's where we get a lot of our ideas from, but have some curiosity to look into it for yourself. It may or may not be what you thought, but in regards to the truth that you discover, but as someone famously said, the truth has the power to set you and those around you free. Now, if the truth can set you free, obviously converse, a lie or an untruth has the opposite effect. It has the ability to enslave you and those around you. And I think, finally, the truth should be able to stand testing. It should be able to, truth should never be afraid of someone coming to it and saying, hey, prove it. Or coming to it and saying, can you show me the reasons behind why you're saying that is truth? I think truth is never afraid to defend itself. Hey, something to think about. Well, that's it episode 12. I love getting to share some of these ideas and stuff with you. Again, please, if you'd like to, just fire some comments in the comments section below. After the end of the show and the credits, we put our email address there if you'd like to write something to us, make suggestions. We love to hear from you. Hey, so look, thanks for joining us. Hope it's brought a measure of help or clarity or blessing into your life in some way. Hey, God bless you guys, and look forward to seeing you again real soon, because I've got a whole bunch of these What's It Like videos, interviews I've already pre-recorded. I'm even thinking we need to do the show a bit more often, but we're going to have a look at that. Hey, God bless you guys. Have a fantastic rest of your evening.